Welcome everyone to the Opportunity International webinar on your impact and update on your programs. I'd like to introduce Dan Murray, our CEO here today, and he's going to speak to you. Dan?
Well, thank you, Andrew, and good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you are in the country. As Andrew mentioned, my name is Dan Murray, and I serve as the CEO of Opportunity International Canada. I'm here today with my program colleagues, Jenna Lee Anderson and Martha Arias, to provide an update on our impact in 2020 and also to look ahead a little into 2021. I want to thank you for joining us this afternoon and setting aside a little time to hear about our work. And I'd like to begin with just a simple thank you. Thank you for generously supporting our work in 2020, especially in the face of this pandemic. As you will hear over the next 30 minutes or so, you helped us to make a significant difference in the lives of our partners and clients. You know, it was just under a year ago that this pandemic was declared. Early on, we knew that things would get very challenging for microfinance clients everywhere, and for our implementing partners and their clients in particular, as the clients were unable to make loan payments, as well as for education-funded schools that were forced to close down during the shutdown. You know, to respond to this threat, by March, we had completely shifted gears, focusing almost all of our program funding efforts towards COVID-19 support. And at the same time, we had to move all of our philanthropic fundraising efforts online with virtual galas, a virtual inside trip, and even virtual golf tournaments. And the amazing thing is that you, our supporters, came through, responding generously to the challenge to stand strongly with our partners and clients through a very difficult year. And stand with us, you did. Now, some donors saw their businesses thrive during the pandemic and they were able to increase their support. And others told us that although they were taking a hit, they would maintain support because our clients were much worse off than they were, or because the work of Opportunity International is so impactful. As a result, we were able to provide tangible and meaningful financial support for our partners and their work with clients throughout the year. As our CFO, Grace Loney, reported in the January newsletter, last year, 1,185 donors continued to support the mission of Opportunity Canada in spite of the uncertainty and disruption of the times. She reported that our 2020 preliminary revenue is just over $7.525 million. And that was against a budget of 7.275. So we exceeded our budget by $250,000 at least. And that's something none of us would have predicted at the outset of the pandemic. As a result, over the year, we were able to disperse almost $7 million, 6.938, in funding to our implementing partners, which translates to directly impacting more than 250,000 individuals and indirectly impacting 5 times that number. This has left me with a sense of awe and gratefulness, and a deep appreciation for all of you who cared deeply about the impact of our work and responded so generously. Jenna Lee and Martha will provide an update on a number of projects and countries, so I will touch on just 2, India and Haiti. Early in the pandemic, we were able to send generous support for the Community Health Leader Initiative in India. That is under the leadership of our Opportunity International colleagues in Australia. This network of amazing women health entrepreneurs is impacting millions with practical health support in rural areas, while each of them also earn a sustainable income to support their own families. It's really the wonderful application of the genius of microfinance to the critically important health sector. And the funds were timely and proved especially helpful early on with pandemic preparedness training. Looking ahead to the future, we're excited to support this inspiring initiative as it expands in 2021 and beyond. And in Haiti, there are now 200 women supported jointly by Opportunity International Canada and our colleagues in the USA that are nearing the end of their 18-month journey in the Pathways to a Better Life program. This program, managed by our German colleagues, invests in some of the most marginalized women in our hemisphere, providing them with the training, confidence, and startup assets needed to acquire and grow a sustainable livelihood. And most of all, it gives them a voice in their families and communities. Despite the challenges of COVID-19, the program adapted and was able to continue on schedule, with most client assets growing in value, latrines built, water filters installed, and houses renovated with waterproof roofs. When they graduate this summer, there will be 200 families with a more hopeful future because of your support. In 2021, here at Opportunity Canada, we have a goal to raise another $300,000 in order to help another 100 women start this journey of hope. And you can learn a lot more about this empowering program by registering for our International Women's Day webinar on March 8th, when Anka Lukia, the CEO of Opportunity Germany, will be our guest speaker. Before I turn the microphone over to my colleagues, let me add that for 2021, our primary focus will be to help our clients to thrive, with a particular focus on the Dominican Republic, Honduras, and Nicaragua. We want to help clients as they emerge from the pandemic to rebuild decimated livelihoods and restart the journey of hope towards a better future for their families. In other words, to continue to do what we do best. And now over to Janely and Martha to share further about the impact in 2020. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you, Andrew, for opening up the presentation. So I'm going to start by sharing with you a program update of the 4 countries, Honduras, Nicaragua, Dominican Republic, and Colombia. I just wanted to give you a general update on the impact that COVID-19 has had in the region. It's been the hardest hit region with over 19 million cases reported. And the IMF is projecting 8% economic contraction in the region, which will translate into recession in almost every country. And this, as we all know, will increase the income inequality and the poverty throughout the entire region. And unfortunately, countries that have been struggling from previously, for example, Nicaragua, with the social political crisis that started in 2018, in addition to it, having COVID-19 has had terrible, devastating effects in the economy of the country. Similar to Honduras, after 9 months of COVID, being hit by 2 hurricanes in 1 month has really pushed the country to very, very challenging times, especially people who are, I'm sure you've seen the news, are desperately trying to leave the country with hope of other opportunities in the caravan of immigrants going north. And as part of COVID, as just here and everywhere in the world, the restrictions were implemented with very strict lockdowns, especially in Colombia and Honduras, where the lives and the livelihoods were severely impacted. And one of the type of clients that were really impacted in the case of Honduras were the ones in transportation, those that own a motorcycle or a little bus or a taxi. They were unable to work for 7-8 months. So what they had to do is they had to basically use up all their savings. They had to use help, ask relatives for help. And then when they were able to start working again in October, hurricanes hit. So can you imagine the situation of clients who for months have not been able to start working, and now they're stopped again by a natural disaster like a hurricane. In the DR, as we know, the tourism industry has been the hardest hit. And when I contacted our loan officers in, for example, Puerto Plata, the Sosúa area, and La Romana, I called them, once the pandemic hit in April, March, they said that their towns were ghost towns. They're highly dependent on tourism. And when you have, no cruise ships, no all-inclusive hotels operating, their lives are basically in a standby. Thankfully, the tourism started, the flights started coming in July, but the words of our loan officer in Puerto Plata were, our people want to go back to work. They're fearful what the tourists could bring. All the virus could come back. But his words that really, impacted me was, but need is greater than fear. And most of the people had to go back to their work, but the capacity of the hotels and everything is probably not even at a 20%. And all this has led to an increased levels of unemployment across the entire region. And I just recently did a report in northern Honduras, which is where the hurricane hit the most. And I collected a sample of 60 individual clients who, in a normal year, they would have generated at least one more job. And when I collected the information, they have only hired 10 more people instead of 60, which means 50 are unemployed. And that tells you the level of impact in their businesses and their ability to even hire others, which really is heartbreaking. Another huge impact that COVID had in our partners was most of the governments decided to set their schooling virtually, which basically meant that the digital divide was even greater. Those with a computer had better education. Those with internet access had a better education than those without it. The dropout rates increased dramatically and also meant that many of the young kids were working, having to go to work early at an earlier age. And with all these difficulties, one thing that really kind of brought hope was two of our implementing partners, Agape and IHF, were key at really helping this digital divide and these challenging times for many youth across the region. So just to give you an example, IHF developed over 16 virtual modules about financial literacy for children. And the modules were so interactive and creative that some of the schools that were implementing the programs, they asked them if they could use for the entire school. So instead of reaching through approximately 3,000 youth, they were able to reach over 4,000 youth with these virtual training regarding financial literacy. And they were able to develop modules that they will be able to use and spread all over the country. And then our Agape partner in Colombia, they are implementing education finance there, and they were able to provide many schools that are part of the clusters of education finance incredible training modules with things like how to reopen the schools when the pandemic is over, how to teach remotely, how to engage and support parents during this homeschooling. And I wish I personally would have had access to some of those training, because it's been challenging for all of us across the world, sorry. And the reason I have this slide of Agape here is because when I talked to Mitzi, our staff in Colombia, one thing that I loved how she described the challenges of virtual training with our clients. What she said, it was so incredible, heartwarming to open a Zoom call and seeing those who have access to internet to giggle, seeing themselves, all these faces on Zoom for the first time ever accessing a platform like Zoom. And you can see in this slide how some of them may be only one member of this isn't a savings group training. They all bunched up, 5 of them with their masks, trying to see, how it is to receive training through Zoom. Other ones, like the lady on the left, the grandma asking the granddaughter how to access this, and all of them finding ways to basically still craving that training that we provide and that relationship that makes us different from other microfinance organizations. So she said, we're not only doing financial literacy, but technology literacy. So I think through IHF and many of our partners, that's one thing that we successfully achieved was giving them not only financial literacy, but technology literacy. And this reminds me, teaching my parents how to use Zoom for the first time and how they were giggling seeing all this. So it is incredible how we've been able to go beyond just financial literacy and allowing them to do this. So on the next slide, I just want to share with you what did we do in 2020. So basically, our partners stopped and limited their operations because most governments put this lockdown restrictions that did not allow them to operate. For example, in Honduras, MFIs, microfinance organizations, were not considered essential services at the beginning. So they got together with a network of microfinance organizations and asked the government to be considered. And within 2 weeks, they were successful and they were able to operate. Partners like in the DR, they only had limited hours available to operate. But in spite of that, all our partners across the region, their focus was to stay connected with our partners through WhatsApp, through cell phone. They were all talking to our clients to make sure they were okay. And at the beginning, many, of course, were having a difficult time even feed themselves. And many of our partners distribute basic food and PPE to be able to connect and letting our clients know that we care for them and we know that they need us. And one thing, the highlight of, I think, as I keep saying on this year, is the virtual training that was developed across the region through WhatsApp, Zoom, Google Classroom, radio, YouTube, Instagram, you name it. The incredible creativity of our partners to develop every way possible to connect with our clients and continue providing really good training regarding finance in the middle of crisis, anxiety, how to develop a business, how to reinvent a business in the middle of a crisis, how to get a business online to be able to sell through Instagram or Facebook. It's been just the highlight of one of the things that our partners have done across the region. And once the restrictions started being lifted up, they have moved more into in-person training with very carefully following all the protocols. And one thing that our partner in the DR, for example, shared with us, that they had to partner with local organizations with the management of, for example, things like anxiety and grieving, because a lot of our clients, once we were able to see them in person, we realized that they needed that in-person contact, but they needed, besides our financial training, they needed a lot of support in terms of anxiety or grieving if somebody in their family must have passed away. Another highlight of 2020 was digitalization. Not all our partners were at the level they should have been, but COVID really forced them to speed up the process. So, for example, in Honduras, how proactive and how quickly they answered the limitations that COVID brought was, for example, they partnered with a cell phone company to conduct a survey to all the clients to find out how were they doing and what they needed. Then they developed in the last 9 months an app to collect payments because many of our clients could not leave their homes because of the lockdown restrictions, and even developed an app to process the loans. So this is really, COVID has really helped us digitalize a lot faster our operations. And the DR, they're in the process of implementing a new core banking system and digitalizing all their services. So this has become a big differentiator that was going to help us in the future, because it's going to increase efficiencies, it's going to allow us to reach farther and to more vulnerable people. And we will continue to work toward this. And one of the key things we did in 2020 is the flexibility. So what do I mean by flexibility? We've provided small loans to help clients restart and reinvent themselves, restructure loans in terms of the length of the payment. We maybe have postponed their payment for 3 to 6 months at the end of the due date. We've given them 3 to 8 months of grace period on payments and interest. Most of these moratoriums were imposed by governments. And other things that we've done is, for example, we've given lower interest rates to those clients that have just impossible capacity to pay, especially those in Honduras with the hurricane, or give them interest-free loans for just the interest part of the payments, because if they accumulated the interest, would have been too much of a financial burden. So we give them a interest-free loan on the interest that they were owing at that point. But interesting enough, clients affected even by the hurricane, 60% actually were able to pay loans, which is actually incredible. 20 made partial payments, and 10 of them reallocated or migrated somewhere else. And that's been a real challenge of being able to reach. Some of them, we still have a hard time reaching them because they lost everything they had and they had to move on to different parts of the country or migrate north. And we continue to support clients in the essential services, just like here. Thankfully, corner stores, pharmacy, those who sold food were able to keep in business, and we continue to support them normally. And then the next slide is about how we were able to reach this flexibility was thanks to our opportunity frontline workers, our field staff. They are the most committed peers that I've ever worked with. Our partners provide them with PPE, and they went out and support our clients facing the fear of COVID. 10% of our field staff got COVID-19. We had the unfortunately loss of one of our field staff, the CEO of Asodenic, who passed away from COVID. And in spite of all these challenges, they went out and helped our clients with all their hearts. And I just wanted to tell briefly the story. Some of you might have heard the story about Brian, who one of our field staff, the one that is giving the food on the left to the client in red. He was giving out food in March and April because clients were unable to eat. And then when the hurricane hit, his house in the middle of the slide is how it looked after the hurricanes. And then we have a staff, his co-workers, the loan officers and supervisors and staff in his office put boots on and went to his house and cleaned out his house. And then as IDH was able to purchase a new fridge, a new stove, and some food for him to basically get started again. And what amazed me the most about Byron is what I have in the next slide is Byron decided to share some of the food with his neighbors and some of the clients that he received from our IDH managers. And this is the type of heroes that we work with, the type of people that give everything out and put their lives at risk to be able to serve our clients. And that's why I want to call them my heroes. And the next one is continuing with flexibility. I want to talk about specifically about Nicaragua. They are having a harder time recovering from this pandemic. The entrepreneurs were already struggling due to the social-political crisis. And like the government, Ortega's government says, we have not stopped working because if we stop working, the country will die. And if the country dies, the people will die. So in a way, it's been positive that no restrictions have been implemented. However, the clients are very sensitive to the uncertainty that this brings. So many have not renewed loans. Many are taking smaller loans, which has had a big impact in the client base and the partners' loan portfolio. And also because of the socio-political situation, the government has imposed new regulations on NGOs. So new permits are required to operate, and there are elections this year. So the uncertainty continues there. And as I said, uncertainty to clients means, being more cautious in the way they manage their finances. So a lot of prayer for our partner in Nicaragua to be able to overcome these challenging times. And then the next slide is about what we're going to do this year. And I think things are not back to normal. So we will continue to provide flexibility us towards our partners and our partners towards our clients. And you have been a key part of that, a key part of allowing us to provide loan funding for our partners, as well as retaining these incredibly loyal staff. You have been big part of being able to keep them. And we will continue with all our virtual training and in-person training, which is the core and what differentiates us from all the other microfinance organizations. And one of the key goals of our partners is continue to become sustainable because they've been very hit by their income levels have been hit severely during this time. So they have to find a balance between larger loans and smaller loans to reach sustainability and profitability. By reducing costs and increasing efficiencies, I think they will have to continue focusing on digitalization, and Opportunity Canada will continue to support operational expenses. But at the end of the day, I think what will be the key is savings, and I think savings will become in the next slide. The demand for credit might take a little while to recover, but savings are a key financial service to help financial resilience. And the training to teach them the importance of having that safety net during a crisis will be really important. And our savings group in Colombia and in DR will be key components of our next steps in the coming year. And the next slide, I just want to end with a story. And I apologize for the blurry picture, but my heroes are now the ones that take my photos because I cannot travel, have not been in the field since last February. So my heroes are the ones that send me the photos, and some heroes have better cameras in their photos than others, but I love them anyway. So this is Iris in Northern Honduras. She received a $1,000 loan at the end of 2019 for her food stand. Her profit increased, by March, 20%, and then COVID hit, and then she was only able to make $7 a day to feed her 4 children. And then IDH came with a relief loan that helped her restart and start delivering some of her food. And she started hiring others in her community to be able to deliver this. Once she started getting, established and doing better, then the hurricane hit. And when we asked her what happened when the hurricane hit, she said, actually, the business got better because all the people in my community were buying food for all those who were impacted by the hurricane. My business grew because others were helping others. So I just wanted to end my part of the presentation by saying that I picked this story because you can see through this the importance of our partners being flexible with them by providing relief loans or other type of loans that will help them get restarted or reinvent themselves. The importance of how this help that we provide to our clients is impacting their community, and they're hiring others, and how their communities are helping each other, which is really heartwarming. And at the end of the day, all that we're doing is to help our clients to face one of the biggest challenges they're having to encounter. And they're showing us more than anything, I think this job is brought so much anxiety in some ways, because so much heartbreak and so many stories, but at the same time, so much hope that, our clients teach us how we always need to stay positive and see the positive of everything that we have and focus on what we have and know what we don't have. So thank you. And I'll pass the presentation to Jana Lee Anderson, who will focus more in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. As you heard from Dan and Martha about our implementing partners' work in Latin America and India, we reflect on 2020 with amazement at our partners and their clients' perseverance, creativity, and stick-to-itiveness. And now as we enter 2021, we look forward with them in hope. For the final section of this webinar, it's my privilege to present an update on the FindEv program and education finance. So please travel with me in your mind's eye across the Atlantic over to Africa, and zoning in on West Africa and Ghana specifically. As Martha mentioned, there were many common challenges across the Latin American countries, as well as shared, customized, and innovative responses. Likewise, many of those challenges and responses were similarly true in Sub-Saharan Africa and at our implementing partner, Sinapi ABA Savings and Loans in Ghana. 11 months ago, everything changed. The Ghanaian government shut down their borders, schools, places of worship, and businesses right away in March. However, within a couple of months, the president noted that more people were dying of other medical conditions and afraid to go into the hospitals because of COVID or of poverty, and they decided to do a careful and strategic reopening. They fumigated large markets and gave everyone a color-coded card. This allowed small businesses to be at the market every other day, thus decreasing the market density, but still allowing for businesses to continue. Schools opened briefly in the summer to allow for final exams, allowing young people to move forward. They closed again in the fall, and schools have only now officially reopened just in January. Ghana's finance minister noted in this week's Economist that Sub-Saharan Africa will lose at least a decade with regards to the economic shock. And we have heard this consistently in global reports. He said, it's like sailing down the Niagara Falls on an African canoe. Within this context, our implementing partner, Sinapi ABA Savings and Loans, has stayed open to serve their clientele. Branches remained open, but with limited hours and limited staff at first in order to keep everyone safe. But as restrictions lessened and PPE was available, they have opened up to full-scale operations again. Our partnership with Sinapi is centered mainly around the FindEv program. FindEv stands for Financial Inclusion for Enterprise Development. This is a 5-year program, mainly funded by Global Affairs Canada, and we are deeply grateful to them for this impactful program. In 2020, we dispersed $4 million to SNAPI for FindDev's 10 project initiatives. Despite the COVID-19 restrictions, and thanks to SNAPI's perseverance and creativity, all targets are on track. Last spring, SNAPI did halt lending briefly to assess the situation. They wanted to make sure that they only lent to businesses that were allowed to be open so as to stay true to the global client protection principles. They also developed a risk assessment and emergency response document that outlined the potential risk to each department and their appropriate responses. This was submitted to the Bank of Ghana last spring. In the midst of this climate, SNAPI still grew their SME client numbers to 16,500 SME loan clients. They paused their group training sessions, both for staff and clients, and changed over to digital training this summer. As restrictions eased, they restarted their group client training, but in smaller groups to allow for social distancing and with PPE for everyone. Interestingly, the final research project for FindDev that was focused on digital financial services, and the team pivoted the project in order to continue through the pandemic. It was scheduled for this past 2020 from March to December. The previous year, SNAPI had launched their SNAPI mobile banking app, and this research project experimented with interactive voice messaging. This turned out to be especially timely during COVID and was critical in reaching both the mainline and marginalized client groups with financial literacy, digital literacy, and health information. Another bright spot in the midst of 2020 was in October when SNAPI Abbey was awarded the Best Bank for Women Entrepreneurs by the Global SME Finance Forum. The High Commissioner for Canada in Ghana joined with us in congratulating SNAPI on their award and noted how critical SNAPI's work of economic inclusion is in Ghana as the nation recovers from the impacts of the pandemic. And so as 2021 begins, where do we go from here? The FindDev program continues into Q1 of 2022. Our goals are to reach 18,000 SME clients with loan services and business training, create or sustain 50,000 jobs, and impact over 200,000 indirect beneficiaries. And I'm grateful to tell you that SNAPI ABBA is absolutely on track to do that. All project components will continue this year, but a couple of additional highlights to note are the following. We'll launch a second women's mentorship program. We also plan to launch 2 additional pilots, an export readiness pilot and an alternative collateral pilot project. And we plan to increase the digital financial services components of SNAPI's business. Globally, it has been noted that during this time of crisis, the digital gap for those who are marginalized widens. It is our goal this year to help narrow that gap. The partnership with SNAPI will continue to bring access to safe and sustainable financial products and services to our clients as they stabilize and rebuild their livelihoods and communities. I'll close the section on Ghana today with the client story. And there we go. Thank you, Andrew. That's great. In 2020, we launched a mentorship pilot program. The goal was to match up goal-oriented women entrepreneurs with successful and experienced SME business owners in order to share good business management practices and skills. This was not only to equip them with business skills in a traditional sense, but also with the ability to think like an entrepreneur. So 2 weeks ago, they held their graduation and also chose 4 mentor-mentee combination as award winners. The picture that you have in front of you is of the top winner. And I'll briefly introduce you to these 3 beautiful women, Akua, the mentor, and Ellen and Martha, the mentees. Akua is in blue and is the mentor. She has been a SNAPI client for 7 years now. Her business is imports and exports, and she employs 16 people. She met with her mentees, Ellen and Martha, twice a week in person when possible this last year, but by phone during lockdown, and taught them business concepts as well as the importance of prayer for their businesses and for their employees. Akua helped Ellen develop a business plan which included helping her relocate to a better location. And she helped connect Martha to a better wholesaler, enabling her to get better prices, having flexible payment terms, and increasing her margins. Both mentees diversified their businesses during COVID and built in succession plans, thanks to Akua's help. Akua tells her mentees, and I'm going to quote this directly from her, that it doesn't matter where you are coming from. We can all make it. There is no limit to what we can accomplish. You should be fierce and never give up in life. Her mentees say Akua was a God-sent angel, and the pilot project came at just the right time. So we'll change gears now to a moment and end with the education finance. There we go. Thank you, Andrew. So we've heard today about country-specific projects from Dan, Martha, and myself. And as we end our time together, I'm going to go back up to a global level and give you a short update on one of Opportunity International's signature programs, that of Education Finance. Many of you on the line know Education Finance well, but for those to whom it may be new to, Education Finance began as school proprietors applied to our implementing partners for school improvement and capacity building loans for their schools, be it for an additional classroom, a school bus, washrooms, you name it. These school proprietors were educators with an incredible vision. However, the program quickly expanded to also include and provide school fee loans to parents, especially those who were in seasonal jobs, so that they could pay for their children's school fees on time and keep their kids in school. This is especially important in rural areas and for girls. In the last number of years, the Education Finance program has expanded again to include technical assistance for financial institutions and educational quality training and metrics for school proprietors. Education Finance is one of the key industry value chains that Opportunity International has developed. Our global team has 86 FTEs, and globally, they are the world's leading experts in their field. But 2020 was a challenging year. We know here at home, school districts have been affected across Canada, and all the more so in the developing world. It was reported that as many as 1.6 billion children were affected by school closures in over 160 countries. But in the midst of this challenging time, the work of Education Finance has gone on. At a country level, they work in 24 countries around the world, including Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Within those countries, they have 63 financial institutions as partners. Together, they have served 14,000 schools and have positively impacted a cumulative number of 7.3 million children. As global leaders, the Education Finance team conducts research, publishes leading-edge industry white papers, presents at conferences, and produces weekly blogs. I cannot do justice to the Education Finance program in our short time together today, but one programmatic feature that I want to highlight are the crisis response toolkits. Toolkits, both for the schools and the financial institutions that serve those schools, were developed in response to the COVID-19 pandemic to help schools and financial institutions deal with the current crisis and school closures. The Education Finance team drew on lessons from past crises, including the Ebola crisis in West Africa, in creating these toolkits and working to build resiliency for both the current and future crises. To give you a glimpse into how excellent and practical the crisis response toolkits are, they prioritize a Pathways to Reopening document, which highlights business and financial principles for reopening, available in 6 languages and as guidance for teachers and parents on learning at home, children protection principles, education resources, counseling support, and business planning in a pandemic. Opportunities Education Finance's focus is getting more children into better schools with social finance. As we look ahead into this year and into 2022, the Education Finance team's goals include impacting an additional 3.3 million children and 2,400 schools. And as funding is available, they plan to expand into Bangladesh, Cambodia, and the Middle East. One of the things we all love about Opportunity International is that it runs on a business model, provides safe access to affordable services, and helps create livelihoods. The Education Finance program begins this process by investing in children. The United Nations notes that a child's future income increases up to 20% for each additional year they stay in school. Opportunity International tackles poverty and exclusion and helps families build sustainable and resilient livelihoods across geographies and across generations. Thank you for sharing with us and our implementing partners as we journey forward, and thank you for joining us today.
Well, thanks, Jan and Martha, for that. Those very informative and detailed presentations. And maybe if the 2 of you could stay on video, we'll take any questions that come in if there are questions. I know there was one around board interaction, which I have responded to in writing, but I'll just add that obviously during the pandemic, in-person type connections have been impossible, but it's surprising how powerful Zoom has been as a tool to connect with our implementing partners. In fact, I believe pretty much the whole FindDev program management has been done by Zoom, which is pretty impressive considering the hands-on nature of that. Same thing with the connections with the Latin American partners. Martha and I have had more meetings with implementing partner CEOs over the past year than we normally would when we restricted to in-person visits. I've had about 3 with each of them, and so it's been a really great way to stay in touch. At the board level, we connect almost with all the board chairs. We've had board members on our board. I know from the FindDev program, they make an annual presentation to the SASO board, and when we've had Latin American Implementing Partner conferences, often board chairs are there, and they get to know each other, and then we do know they interact as well. So there's probably more that could be done to stimulate board-to-board connection, but there's a fair amount that's going on, and we're making full use of virtual tools at this time to keep the communications going. So yeah, just kind of toss it out there. There is a Q&A tab at the bottom. So if you do have a question for us, you can throw it out there. If you want to aim it at any of the 3 of us, we'd be happy to jump in on it. But we'll give a minute or 2 here in case there are any questions out there for us. We'd be more than happy to address them.
Dan, we do have a question coming in via a different method, so let me just read that out to you. And this question is for Jan. Jan, can you share a little bit more about the mentor program? Are there classes for mentors? Are there any loan requirements for being part of the mentor program?
I missed the second part of the question, Andrew. Are there any what kind of requirements?
Are there any requirements for any loan requirements for being part of the program?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, they are. The only requirement is that they're a Sinapi client, but some of them start out as savings clients. They don't all have to be loan clients. So many of them are both savings and loans clients, but it's not a prerequisite. Because this first project was a pilot, what we did is we picked 10 branches, and Sinapi has 40 branches overall. So the chief program officer over at SASL picked 10 branches and asked the branch managers to scout out through their clients, because they knew the branch managers would already know who would be eager and qualified and ready for a program like this. And then any of the both mentors and mentees that were interested had to fill out a questionnaire and were chosen. So there was a vetting process, and they did have to meet criteria. I mean, it was pretty simple criteria, but nevertheless, there was vetting. And then, yes, the program, as I said, it was supposed to be 6 months, but it was extended due to COVID and elections and everything like that. But the original idea was to have training at 3 different levels. So actually 4 levels. The first and most crucial level was the mentor-mentee level, and that training would take place twice a week. And then also the second level is then at the branch level, where the branch manager would give training. And then at the regional level, where they would get together for networking events and for regional training, and then at the national level. That was the original plan when it launched in January 2020, before COVID broke out in Ghana in March. So that being said, most of the regional and national training had to be paused. The mentor-mentee training was still able to happen, and the branch training was still able to happen. But what we actually had designed as part of this program was a whole mentorship guide. So we have developed a mentorship guide for both the mentee and the mentor, hard copy. And then more importantly, last spring, we digitized it. Let me say that again, digitized it. And so, so that way, even despite the lockdowns, everybody was able to log on to their mobile app and receive the training videos, the lessons, the quizzes, things like that. And the quizzes were set up in such a way that the mentor and mentee could review them. And the questions that the mentee got right, they didn't need to spend extra time on. They looked at what were the questions that the mentee got wrong, and then let's focus in on those areas of business. So that really accelerated the time that they did have together. They were able to hone in on the skills and the problems and the challenges, or the opportunities in some cases that the mentees had. So yeah, lots more could be said, but let me pause there for the moment, Andrew.
Wonderful, thank you so much. I do have another question that's come in from Martha. What has been the impact for the youth programs with no schools in Colombia? How are they able to still work with kids?
Mm-hmm. The program in Colombia is basically a Jew finance. So they've been doing it all virtually. And thanks to what Jenna Lee mentioned, the COVID-19 toolkit that the education finance team developed, as I was saying in my presentation, they have been able to actually train the teachers on how to improve their virtual training to the children. And they've been continue connecting with all the schools via Zoom, via Google Classroom. And I think all those schools are really blessed to be part of the education finance program because they are receiving that additional support that no other school is receiving. And the children, unfortunately, the reality is, as I mentioned, the digital divide is there. Those with access to a device and internet are the ones that are getting the best they can. But in terms of IHF, it's become such a hands-on experience that some kids have blossomed. There was a story that Jean Fran shared with me, a girl that she said, my internet was so bad I could barely hear my teacher, but at least I have the financial training that IHF gives me, and now I'm able to basically sell cookies and learn about financial management as I work through it. And it's my only kind of the highlight of my day is IHF training because I can barely get through my schooling. So in spite of the limitations, I think both of our partners, IHF and Agape, have been able to successfully reach as many children as possible in spite of the challenges of access to technology to so many children. And I just want to mention briefly, like in the DR, one of the challenges that we had with our inclusion project was that we have a lot of children in the education finance program that we have in the DR that targets schools with children with disabilities. How do you do virtual schooling where children have challenges learning? So one thing these schools did, thanks to the support of our Aspire partner in the DR, was they actually allowed children with disabilities to come physically to the school 2 to 3 times a week because they know that they needed it. And because they were so, limited the amount of children that had the disabilities, they were able to social distance within the school. So our partners have been able to basically tailor depending on the needs and provide all those services to those clients, to those children that are having to go virtually, and some have more limitations than others.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Jen, a request has been made for you. Can you make a few comments on what's going on with the agricultural finance program? We did hear from Tim Strong in the fall about that program, and if you could speak to what's been going on there.
I'm sorry, Andrew, was that Dan or Jan?
That would be you, Jan. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, sorry. Okay. Yeah, pros and cons of Zoom. Sure. Yeah, agricultural finance is, they also continue to expand. And we didn't, because time was tight today, we didn't have a special section for agricultural finance because especially we did have Tim Strong as one of our guest speakers in the fall. And so we were able to get a whole half an hour directly from Tim. But just a couple of highlights. They are expanding, and the interesting thing that they are doing, and I guess I would say some of the things that have been highlighted this year is because of the food security need. And so it's the sort of thing that everyone around the world knows that agriculture is important, but I think this year the world is looking at it with more importance and more critically. And the world should have done that all the way along, but it is now, because now the first world is also recognizing the importance and the criticalness of it. And so, so they're standing with organizations and groups like Agricultural Finance and Tim Strong and his team as they roll out those challenging programs to the developing world. So Tim's team is not as big as Andrew's education finance team, but it's growing. They are not in as many countries, but are ready and apt to expand as funding is available. And so they also work with both financial institutions. Actually, they work at 3 levels: financial institutions and clients, same with education finance, but also with farm service providers or farmer agents in the middle. So they work with at least 3 different layers, but also the whole value chain. So they're really looking at that. They provide not only technical assistance and financial assistance through the financial partners, but they also provide now a lot of training, as Martha and I have said, with other programs on mobile apps as well. So they have not only tutorial videos that they use, but they've also got farmers actually explaining ideas to farmers. And so that's gone over really well as well. Like they do have the general training videos that are accessible to everyone for some of the good agricultural practices. But then, like I said, they've also got farmers speaking to farmers. And so that has gone a long way, especially cross-culturally within some of the different areas and regions. A couple of things that agricultural finance is expanding into also are the areas, and I'm just thinking not only of 2020, but 2021 and 22 and going forward, but they are piloting projects with youth, because especially in Africa, the average age of Africa, this is kind of a generalization as a continent, but from The Economist notes that it's 19 is the average age. So they're trying to really look at job creation. I know education finance and opportunity partners are doing that, but agricultural finance is doing that also, because they're trying to say, if you've grown up in the country and if agriculture is an option for you, let's help you do it successfully, sustainably, and profitably, so we can help you stay there in a stabilized situation. So they're starting to work with youth, and they have a fantastic pilot in Uganda, along with Opportunity UK, that are working with youth. And it's a pilot project with a number of organizations. One of the organizations is called Teach a Man to Fish, where they're also teaching not just financial literacy and business skills, but also good agricultural practices. So that's one thing they're doing. But it's, yeah, many, many other pilot projects around the world. And Andrew, like I said before, they're ready to expand as funding permits, definitely. They're using digital financial services wherever they can to expand their platform as well.
Okay, thank you so much, Dan. I do have a couple more questions. First question is, traditional repayment rates have been 95 to 99%. Is there an estimate of what those repayment rates might be today? So I'll leave that open. I don't know who wants to answer that one.
I can start, and then if Martha wants to jump in, I think it really depends on the country. So it depends on the country, it depends on the implementing partner, and it even depends within the implementing partner on the product line. So I'll give you an example that I know would be true for both Africa and also the Latin American partners with education finance, for instance. I know that SASL they are still keeping about a 95, 96 performance rate on loan repayment, but actually the sector that they are having the most challenge with right now is education finance, but for obvious reasons. If the schools haven't been open for 9 months, then you can't get the school loan fees in, and then they can't necessarily pay their loans. So that is that par is a little bit higher, and I know that's across the board for the education finance program. So that's on the one hand, it's a tough situation, but on the other hand, it's a logical one. There's no surprises there. It makes sense. We understand that, and we also see it improving now as schools reopen. We know that as kids come back, school fees will be paid, and they will be able to repay back their loans. So it's not a surprise. It's a business challenge, but the program is ready to do that and is helping to work through their toolkits with the financial institutions on helping balance and stabilize that risk. Martha, I don't know if you want to give another example. No. I know Latin America has been hit worse. Yeah,
I think I would agree with you that the repayment rate will depend on the country, on the partner, on the product. So in countries where the restrictions have been greater, the repayment rate is lower. Surprisingly, in Nicaragua, our partner is being incredibly diligent about it, and actually the repayment rate is improved. They have an arrears of, I think, less than 4% now, which is incredible. But countries like the DR, where they're really having a difficult time getting the economy going, is probably around 13%. But in terms of product, I agree with loan product with Jana Lee. In terms of the DR, for example, their education, their school loans are being the hardest hit, as well as their church loans, both that obviously for obvious reasons have not been able to receive the income they usually receive. And also, for example, as I mentioned in my presentation, clients in the transportation are the ones that have been hit the hardest in Honduras because they were unable to operate, but clients with a corner store, with a pharmacy, or selling food, you know, they're obviously making their payments. So it varies at a different level. But overall, I think most of our partners have experienced a decrease in repayment rates. But surprisingly, there's surprises just like Nicaragua. They have one of the best repayment rates among our partners. So I hope I answered the question.
Wonderful. Thank you, Martha. We have one last question, Dan, and it's to you. And so you can answer this question, then probably wrap up afterwards. So the question is, what is Opportunity's visionary goal for fundraising efforts this year? With what was accomplished in 2020, how has that influenced goals for this year?
Oh, that's a great question. So it's interesting because you know, we exceeded our expectations in 2020. We actually hit 2020 with a fairly ambitious goal, and we're quite surprised to beat that budget. But we're also equally concerned about the dragging effects of the pandemic on the economy. And so there's with the board, we decided to take a relatively conservative approach in 2021. And if we beat that, that's great. So we have more or less a hold our own in terms of the target for 2021, making it quite similar to 2022, but with kind of like a huge upside challenge to our team. We have some very creative and ambitious, hardworking fundraisers who deeply believe in our mission, and of course our support base does as well. And the need is tremendous. The goals we have are good goals overall, but we'd like to see a whole lot more. So I mentioned in my opening remarks that our focus for 2021, although we'll continue to support a number of these initiatives like in Haiti and India, that we have been committed to, our primary thrust is helping clients rebuild decimated livelihoods as they emerge from the pandemic, with a specific focus on the 3 Latin American countries where we're working directly with MFIs, Honduras, Nicaragua, and the DR. And the drop in PAR is primarily a short-term effect of the pandemic, but it does reflect livelihoods that have been destroyed and that need to be brought back to life somehow. And so that's what we're going to be focused on fundraising for and working with our partners to see that happen. Quite frankly, as has been discussed around our team, if we try to raise a couple of $1 million of support, that's the goal we set just for the Thrive campaign, we're calling it. We started the Thrive campaign in the fall, and we're going to continue that. We'd like to really focus on, as much support as we can to our partners there, but those countries could take twice that or 3 times that, and, still have lots of need that we need to address. So that's where we're going over the next year. And then, we'll kind of reassess at the end of this year. And hopefully by then, with the vaccine rollout, we have economies beginning to open up and can start to move forward, more ambitious plans after that. Just kind of a couple of closing comments. I'm intrigued, as we hear about education finance and ag finance and health, and just the regular microfinance, small enterprise development work that we do. It's amazing seeing the genius of microfinance applied into sector-specific areas in a sustainable way that actually makes a tremendous difference, whether it's in health initiatives in India or other places, the ag work that Jan just touched on, and of course the incredible work that's being done by the Global Education Finance team. And then you, of course, have just microfinance clients everywhere that are, opening hair salons or driving taxis or working in small grocery stores, or whatever it is they do, providing for the families, creating jobs for the neighbors. It's an incredibly inspiring thing. And we're all on a journey together for that. So I'd like to just wrap up at this point. Thank you so much for hanging in with us. Thanks for your interest in our work and your support for it. And of course, if you have any other questions, feel free to contact any one of us, and we'd be more than happy to interact further with you. So on that note, I guess we'll bid farewell. And one last point I've almost forgot to mention, and Andrew will probably be frustrated if I don't get it out there. I did touch on it in my opening remarks, but on March 8th, International Women's Day, we have an event called the Empower Her Haiti event. And we're making the connection between, trying to get another 100 women into that Pathway to a Better Life program in Haiti as a way to empower women, to give women a voice. These are some of the most marginalized and disenfranchised women in our hemisphere. And it's a journey from being pretty much on the margins of their societies to becoming contributing members with their own livelihoods 18 months later. It's an unbelievable journey. towards a sustainable livelihood. And we're going to learn all about that from my counterpart, the CEO of Opportunity International Germany, Anke. She will be our guest speaker for a special event on March 8th, and you won't want to miss it. So please check out the information that Andrew has provided, and you can register for that event. And on that note, Martha, Jan-Lee, Andrew, thank you so much. Fun doing this with you, and we got to do this again. All right, farewell everyone, and have a great afternoon.